Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by TheLines.com. I'm Eli Hershkovich, joined as always by Justin Perri of Shot Quality and Shot Quality Bets, handicapping the Tuesday college basketball card after a great weekend. Justin, last week on Friday, I gave you some crap for the St. Bonaventure Dayton bet. I want to give you props because I think you were oppo, or at least tried to talk me out of Ole Miss Auburn. Now, I will say, if Ole Miss hit their free throws, you don't shoot below 70% for the free throw line, probably cover the bet. But either way, props to you.
Well, I try to do my best. I like the immediate correction. I stayed on Dayton too, so I got back a little bit of money.
Hell yeah.
On Dayton, who got a good bounce back win there on the road. So that was nice, and I had a great weekend. Really, honestly, sunk my teeth into some stuff. I've been trying to work on some new edges. I feel like I was on the tip of uncovering and actually think I have. So hopefully an interesting end of the season for me, and some aggressive gambling. So that'll be fun. And, just having a good time, handicapping some college basketball and seeing if I can, beat this market. And it's been a great season, honestly. So having a good time with it. Already February. We're going to be here in March before you know it.
Aggressive gambling. Sounds like a reality TV show.
I mean, I feel like there would be such a fun gambling, sports betting reality TV show if you didn't already know what was going to happen in the games they had bet on. Like, oh, well, they're betting on the Week 15 Eagles game. I know what happened, so I know if he's going to win this bet or not. It kind of kills it. It's going to be fun. I wish there was something. You got to do it the next day, but nonetheless, should be a good end of the season. Have my sights set on a couple things. I think I'm going to talk about some of the big games I like in this episode, so it should be a good one.
If you want to play aggressive gambling, follow along with Beat the Closing Number. Over under 20 tissues and or coughs from me on this episode. I'm going with the over without even knowing what's going to happen here. This is pre-flop on my end. So
bad bookmaking already from the house. Okay, all right, I'll trust
exactly. I've given away my edge. You said you
seriously
think you have an edge. I have completely given away the over here for anybody who wants to play along. But I digress, Justin. We have a bunch of great games to go over on the Tuesday college basketball slate with our best bets. Looking at here, Big East matchup on Tuesday. You'll be at this game. Marquette at St. John's. Big one in the Big East. 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time tip on FS1. St. John's blew a 19-point second-half lead against Providence over the weekend. Kadari Richmond hit the game-winning mid-range jump shot. A little bit of a teaser there in terms of my angle for this game. So St. John's holding off Providence, and then Marquette never led against UConn. Clearly a statement game from Dan Hurley's Huskies on Saturday night. The Golden Eagles trailed by as many as 22 points in the first half. What's your angle here, and do you think you'll get reception to live bet this one?
Yeah, I do think I'll get reception to live bet it. It's not that hard at MSG. Usually if it's fully packed, but I do expect some of the upper deck seats to be a little empty tomorrow. 6:30 p.m. tip on a Tuesday. So, might have a little bit of that type of fallout, but ticket prices were pretty high. Again, two ranked programs. St. John's carrying the number 12 into this one. I mean, this is going to be fun. This is arguably one of the most fun games of the season thus far, maybe in Rick Pitino's tenure at MSG with this team. So really excited to be there. My angle, here's the thing, Eli, you know me, and maybe some of the people who are watching or listening might not. I don't really do a lot of human thinking in terms of my betting. It's all numbers.
Well, analytical angle.
Right. I don't really bring in the human element. I try not to feel things out. I just really go by numbers and what's worked and, deriving what I perceive to be my edge. Marquette is my edge. I have an edge on Marquette. Is unfortunate as a fan. I'll look exactly like this if you're going to be at the Garden tomorrow. I just unboxed the fresh, crispy R.J. Lewis Jr. jersey. I will take it off immediately after filming this podcast, and then I will put it.
Time out, because I want to have a quick discussion about jerseys. So I used to work in Chicago sports radio. This is when I was an intern, actually. I got a ton of flack for wearing jerseys to the point where I never wore one again because the kind of criticism that elitists tend to give about adult males who wear jerseys and jerseys, well, you're the same age as them. Why are you rocking a jersey, let alone a jersey? So I'll ask you that question because they're completely out of my life at this point. Not that I'm judging.
You mean like why a jersey? Because I couldn't. I personally, it's a couple things. I collect T-shirts. I have a college basketball T-shirt collection. That is what I've decided to run with. I don't know why. I find them a little bit more fun. I don't think you can really wear a jersey to as many things. Like, I love the athletic T-shirt in the gym. Like, that's the thing. It's a gym shirt collection for me, and like a pajama shirt and like a lounge shirt collection for me. So I do have some jerseys. My jersey collection's more geared towards like my fandom. So I have like some throwback. I have a Karl Anthony Towns Kentucky jersey. I have a signed, game worn Deuce McBride West Virginia jersey. I have a signed Tyler Kolek jersey.
But these are jerseys, and not that I'm hating at all on the jersey game. It's just it makes me think back to right.
Yeah, this is my first jersey with the number on it. Usually I usually just do like the St. John's basketball, but like in terms of RJ having a great season, I love the Scarlet too, which is a little bit tougher to find. A lot of the St. John's stuff is the white jersey. And yeah, this was just already in stock. I wanted it for the game. I rush ordered it to get it here. And honestly, it's just a little bit more financially feasible if I want to collect the whole team in this format rather than the jerseys. So again, I'm a T-shirt guy. I love my T-shirts. I'm close to like 40 schools now. So end of season, I'll post a picture of how many T-shirts I have. So yeah, no.
See what I do, and I mentioned this on one of last year's episodes. I collect whether it's a sweatshirt, shirt, hat, of a futures bet that I make because I love rocking the team that I'm rooting for theoretically throughout a tournament run for a couple months. And then I'm like, why did I buy this again when it's June or July?
Yep. I mean, it's fun. I don't know. I'm a big fan. The St. John's team has been awesome. I'm really excited, honestly, back to like handicapping it. Kadari Richmond, like you said, maybe part of your point, taking a little bit of a step up. And I think that's exciting tomorrow with Cam Jones, Kadari. That is one of the most fun battles we're going to see. I mean, could it be RJ Lewis that we're talking about instead? Yeah, but, he's shooting under 29% from three this season. I was looking at St. John's. There's plenty of reason to think that they have a lot more of a ceiling. Aaron Scott, Sim Wilcher shooting pretty cold. But, there's also plenty of reason to think that the cold shooting could continue. We saw the second that they go cold and the defense can lapse, they just look a little human. But, when they're playing well, all five guys can get steals and run transition and finish at the hoop. So it's a fun team. I'm excited to see how it goes tomorrow. Marquette is the first real test, and I think you're getting +3 with Marquette. So I think you want to take those points.
Interestingly enough here, and we'll see how Shaka Smart decides to play it, but per shot quality, Marquette giving up the third fewest open three-point attempts in Big East play. Does that continue against this St. John's offense? Lack thereof in terms of perimeter shooting efficiency and just attempts per game standpoint.
What's really interesting here and why I like this play a lot, looking at it as that analyst, the human on top of the model and the edge and all that good stuff that's kept me up here for so long. They keep the ball. They keep good control of the ball, Eli, and that's a big deal against this St. John's team because they subsist off of those extra possessions that they gain through the steals. So if you're not losing the ball and you're also taking it away from a unit that can be a little sloppy in terms of the St. John's offense, especially if they're trying to force the issue with Zuby Ejiofor at the rim, I do think this could be there's a letdown waiting to happen for St. John's. Like it's coming. They're overrated. The number next to their name is going to continue to keep this a little bit inflated. This is again +3 for Marquette. I would probably make it a pickup. Is around where I have it. So yeah, I think you want to go grab those 3 points off the market. I'll be putting something down shortly, I believe. So that's a nice play in my opinion. I think this is going to be a Marquette win, or at very least a close game. I would be shocked to see this one be an extreme result either way. Could even see even more overtime, because goodness knows it's what happens in the Big East.
Just to jump back to something I said, and interesting that you brought that up, your numbers may have this one near a pick versus St. John's -3. To your point, Red Storm outperforming in a bunch of different areas the overall expectation, especially mid-range efficiency of late. So Marquette's opponents, and Marquette on their end of the floor, in the 3rd percentile of mid-range defensive efficiency and in the 33rd percentile of mid-range attempt rate allowed. So not nearly as bad as I initially thought, but still worth reiterating. And then one last thing here for me in this matchup, another point to back you up. I don't think I'm going to have a play in the game, but I do lean Marquette. Ben Gold has been a much better defender, especially at the rim, than I gave him credit for entering the year, with Marquette making some tweaks in their starting lineup. And I think he may be ready for this matchup against Zuby Ejiofor, because we've seen it time and time again, especially when St. John's has gotten down in some of these games at the Garden. And regardless, they've gone to Ejiofor to kind of reset their offense, and or Kadari Richmond off the dribble mid-range pull-up. But Ejiofor has been a big part of that, kind of resetting things when, to your point, Pitino's team has been a bit erratic at the offensive end.
And look, as the guy sitting here in an RJ Lewis jersey, this is a spot where I think the coach Kim English comments continue to come to light. And St. John's is what he kind of said, right? They're not going to wow you with shot making. They are in the 20th percentile nationally in shot making. And it's, again, that's not really pretty. But they do everything else well. They are mean in transition. They force those turnovers, and then they can finish the rim well in the half court as well. So it's not like they're terrible, but if you can force them to take jump shots, you can definitely beat them. The problem is no one seems to be able to do that for a full game. Everyone calls them the best second half team because, it's an onslaught. They have the penetration from RJ Lewis, from Kadari Richmond, from Smith. They have the big guy inside who can get the offensive rebounds and give them another 20 seconds of attack. And by time you're 30 minutes into that and you have to go a whole another 10 minutes and they're ready to go. Like, the conditioning of this team is impeccable. So that's what's going to be the biggest test for Marquette. So I would look at other teams that maybe move the way St. John's does. It's not as though, they're not the fastest team, but they are like lightning quick when they move. So it doesn't happen every possession, but when they go, the equivalency of shooting 70% from like beneath the rim on a transition bucket, because 1.4 expected points per possession if you let them get into transition. That's the key. Limit those transition buckets. They get into transition the 16th most in the country, though. So how Shaka Smart can limit that, I don't know, because they essentially, they're going to need to hit their shots, because if you're not hitting your shots, then you're not going to get the defensive boards if you're cheat in transition. So what's going to happen? Either Marquette's going to be shooting well or they're going to lose. Welcome to the Garden.
Right. And to that point about Marquette shooting well, looking at Cam Jones, three-point efficiency has not been a strong suit for him over the last 5 or 10 games, around 32%. And if you remember going back to non-conference play, he was like 10-1 to win the Wooden Award. Now he's 100-1, and rightfully so. I just worry, does regression start to happen? You could say the D word in some senses. Maybe he's due for regression, but against this defense, a physical one at that, I have my concerns.
Yeah, they've been struggling offensively in the conference for sure. I expected to be scoring 6 extra points per 100 possessions per shot quality. So, probably where I'll leave it. It's a good buy low on Marquette, a good sell high on St. John's, but it's a scary one. If you like form to continue at St. John's, if you like that median expected average to play out, it's Marquette.
All right, let's move on to another big SEC matchup. 2 teams in dire need of a win. Looking at Ole Miss at home at the Pavilion against Kentucky. The Rebels currently a 3.5-point favorite, juiced in Kentucky's direction. with a total of 155.5. I already bet this one, Justin, on open. I took Ole Miss on the money line, minus 140. So we have seen a little bit of movement already on the Rebels. But digging into some of my cliff notes here, like I hit on from the get-go, Ole Miss missed 11 free throws against Auburn, shooting a smidge below 69%. So you would expect, because they're around a 72-73% shooting team from the charity stripe, if you see them get back to that mean, that average, much likelier chance they cover or just win the game outright at home against Kentucky. Injury-wise, big part of my handicap. Reading between the tea leaves, very unlikely Lamont Butler plays for Kentucky. Kentucky's net rating at both ends of the floor dips significantly with him off the court. And we saw that against Arkansas. He really is their trigger man defensively, a really good on-ball defender going back to his days at San Diego State. Also, Andrew Carr dealing with a back injury that has really limited his effectiveness at both ends of the floor. And then another big part of this for me, Kentucky's offense runs they probably rank in the 95th percentile in terms of when one of the ESPN commentators who I'm blanking on says zoom action per game. I think it's Dykes. He says it about 20, 30 times per game. And rightfully so, because Kentucky runs a ton of zoom action with those dribble handoffs. Ole Miss not only ranks in the 7th percentile when you look at handoff action allowed per game, so how often their opponents are actually truly running those sets efficiently and or just getting the handoff off. And then they rank in the 64th percentile when it comes to defensive efficiency on dribble handoffs. That is because Ole Miss switches aggressively and then some. That's the whole part of Chris Beard's no middle defense. A, not allowing dribble penetration, and B, not letting or just switching hyper aggressively where opponents can't necessarily get those clean looks off of ball screen dribble handoffs. Zoom action is what Jimmy Dykes calls it. So I really like this matchup from Ole Miss's perspective. Maybe you get some shooting regression from Malik Dia in this one, who struggled against Auburn's physicality. Give me Ole Miss on the money line here. I think this is a big bounce back spot for the Rebels after losing 4 of their last 5. Yes, you could say Kentucky needs this one too, but home spot, I make this line closer to Ole Miss minus 5.5.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I'm not betting this one. I'm almost positive. I don't think I wrote it down when I listed everything out. But you're right. I mean, you're right. There's no doubt about it. The no middle, the pick and roll ball screen, the way they play off of it, it looks good. They've done a good job, and they, it creates a low rate of getting to the rim. They don't see a lot of pick and roll because of it. And I do think that it leads to them having a pretty decent shot selection against and creating turnovers on defense. It's definitely been successful in that, second most in the conference so far. But no, I think what it does do, Eli, is it creates looks from deep, right? It allows, I think, for per shot quality, a lot of looks from three, 324th fewest, or like 42nd most. 44.4% of shots against Mississippi have been from deep, and the defense against them is not great. So that's where I think that game will be won for Kentucky. If you're going to lose your bet, it's going to be because they're getting good looks from three and they're hitting them. The expected ability for this team from deep is very good. Expected to be shooting 40% from behind the arc this season. They are shooting about 37. So if you can believe it, expected to be doing even better. Shot quality loves their offense. They don't really force a lot of turnovers. Like you said, a lot of that zoom action. They move fast. Efficient shooters, third most efficient per SQ, and the passing's good. So if they have one of these games where they can, hit everything and get good looks, it should be a spot where I think you might lose. I'm not backing it. I'm not telling you shouldn't do it. I think there's, it's a fair line. It's a sharp line. I'm probably not touching on this one too much, if at all. Good luck.
Well, but the point about injuries, I think, and to your point, Kentucky can get those open looks. We've seen it over and over again with Mark Pope. Although he did have his struggles in the second half, I will say that was probably the first time, and I was shocked to see him get outcoached by John Calipari of all coaches to outcoach you, and we know how much Cal loved that. But at the same time, no Butler and a hampered Carr, and Kentucky's on all of a sudden on a short rotation.
Too. I mean, they played. They shot what 52% on three, their best shooting of the year, and Kentucky missed 9 free throws, their worst of the season. So you give them an extra 4 free throws.
So they win the game, but they don't cover.
Sure, right, but that's likely more important for most people that aren't, I know it's a betting show, but you want to talk about the way the basketball is played, which again is what you want to talk about when you're deriving your bets, more so than how a betting result went. I mean, sometimes people tell me, oh, but they didn't cover. And I'm like, oh yeah, right, because them covering is what the models care about, not how many points they allowed or let up. The market might care, but we're talking about how the basketball goes. You want to talk about how many shots they took, how many times the ball went through the hoop, how many times they missed, how good of a shot, not what did the number land on. In my
totally fair. The point that I want to bring up about Lamont Butler, if you want to talk about from a basketball sense,
yes, good.
Opponents have a +9 net rating offensively with Butler off the court against Kentucky. So Ole Miss is due for some shooting regression. We saw it against Auburn. Then again, Auburn's length played a role there. Kentucky's defense, you're not facing Auburn. Kentucky is very, very prone to giving up big performances offensively. Arkansas played right into that over the weekend, even though they hadn't shot well in SEC play. Kentucky, very, very vulnerable at that end of the court. So, long story short, I think this is a really good spot to back Ole Miss at home. You have to win this game if you're Ole Miss. I expect them to, especially with the injuries in mind for Kentucky.
Let's get it. I wish you luck. I think it's going to be a good game either way.
All right. Let's keep it moving here. Either way, good discussion back and forth here on the first couple games. Neither of us want to agree every single time because that just makes for a better show, the discourse back and forth. If you agree on everything, well, more than likely you're not going to win everything regardless. On to a Big Ten matchup between Purdue and Iowa. Boilermakers per FanDuel on the open, 7.5-point road favorites. Key injury to note here, Owen Freeman, Iowa's leading scorer and rebounder, out for the rest of the season. He is Iowa's lone player, or at least rotation player, above 6'8". How do you match up with Trey Kaufman-Red in this spot? I should say Purdue off of a emotional win off against Indiana over the weekend, yes, but I don't see how you could back Iowa. The only thing I would say is maybe first game without Freeman, somebody steps up. You usually see the market overreact in these kinds of spots, especially the first game, but I don't have any reason to back Iowa.
Me neither, and I'm betting Purdue. So I will take the Boilermakers in this one. It's a little, of course you got a good old Ewing theory spot. Maybe the market moves too much, but I don't think it's moved at all. Data showing that there was some 8.5 on the open, and it's sitting around 7.5 now. I like this thing basically to 9.5. I wouldn't really go too much further. I'm not sure how Iowa's going to look. The splits without him are not pretty. So, yeah, I do think Purdue is maybe a little slept on right now in terms of how efficient their rim attack and their shooting is, how good of passing that, they're able to orchestrate here. Matt Painter, there's a reason he has been so good at creating the super team with Edey. It's not just because Edey was a monster. It's everything, right? It's putting it all together, understanding how to utilize your talent. They maybe, the shooting's so good that they don't attack the rim a lot, and they do rely a little bit on that shot making, but second best expected percent from off the dribble threes, sixth best expected percent from catch and shoot threes, seventh best expected percent finishing at the rim. I mean, what else more do you really need? They definitely shoot the mid-range a lot, but it's because they can go to it. They can rely on it. They're good at it. They get almost 45% expected rate there. They're shooting 50% from the mid-range in conference play, which is crazy and probably won't sustain. But again, they look great. They're absolutely killing it. This could be the spot where, yeah, sure, some of that offensive regression from the rim and maybe the mid-range, the post come home, but they're also kind of cold from behind the line. So it's a little bit of waxing and waning. I think what you're seeing is ultimately what you're getting in a median fashion. And it's pretty safe to trust them to continue to go out there and work from the mid-range and get reliable points. They might not score 80 or 90 every time like they have with this Indiana and the Michigan game, but they're probably going to go out there. I think what happened with like Washington looking like a 9-point win, the way it looked against like even Northwestern or Minnesota, an 18, 20-point win is more in the cards for me than it is, I think, the loss. So, yeah, I really like Purdue. Even if you want to string together some of those heavy favorites in one of those degenerate parlays and use those little boosts, it's a good money line. I would be shocked. I understand it's on the road and anything can happen, and that's definitely some of the concern. But I think, in my opinion, that gives you a little bit of that extra edge, right? If you're saying, okay, I actually think that maybe they shouldn't get that home court the same way because they aren't going to be the same, and maybe they're getting that extra resistance in the market. Yeah, I do really like this Purdue side tomorrow. Probably one of my favorite plays of the day. Probably my pick of the day. I wouldn't be shocked to see it close closer to that 9.5 that I think it is.
I agree.
Just trying to read the tea leaves a little bit for sure. I don't really bet trying to predict where lines move. I bet where I think there's value on what the game will finish at. But if I were trying to predict the tea leaves, I would love this Purdue 7.5 line.
Yeah, and you look at Iowa's post defense. I mean, just from a basketball sense, forget about trying to get closing line value. They rank in the 9th percentile per synergy on post-up defensive efficiency already with Freeman in the lineup. How are you going to stop Kaufman-Renn without Freeman? Now, McCaffrey has done a really good job of adjusting in Ewing theory spots like this. And not last year, but in previous instances against Purdue, he's done a really good job of pressing. Braden Smith and Fletcher Loyer have been better against the press overall this year, but against Texas A&M, teams that have pressured Penn State earlier in Big Ten play in December, turnovers have accumulated on the higher end when they face ball pressure. I would not be surprised to see McCaffrey pressure from the jump in this game just because he knows what's against him without Freeman.
Right. Yeah, you have to, almost.
Would you consider, so let's say you bet Purdue at 7.5.
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Would you consider any middle on like a 11.5?
I'd need 12.5, 13.5. Like, it'd have to get crazy.
Okay.
Like I usually do not middle pre-flop. I don't think I have it all this entire season unless I get injury news and, it's the way to do it rather than pressing the cash out and paying an extra 5 cents, the only time I effectively middle is when I'm live betting and the data indicates that I should be making a bet that it opposes my pregame bet and it turns into an accidental middle or sometimes even a Polish middle. I don't really care. My bets are all independently made. And I've gotten a couple of my Polish middles hit right there in the sweet spot. Hurts like the devil. But when it works well and you cash both way more times than that, it's fun. So. No, it's definitely not something I'm looking to get out of. I think this is probably one of the better plays of the week. Markets are slow to adjust this type of thing, Eli. I really do think so. College
at least
not
open.
Well, I mean, again, college basketball, one of the most underreported injury sports there is. You sometimes don't even know that a key rotation player is out until the game is tipped, and there's no real other. I mean, college football, I don't think has that. That's the only one I don't have the experience to know. Maybe they could have that. But again, football's so different where like you're missing a player unless it's the quarterback or like a key wide receiver. And those aren't falling through the cracks nearly as much in high profile games. So yeah, maybe there's injury news on low major college football, FBS type stuff where you can get a similar type of edge. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely, one of those sports where, especially if you're playing big, you want to make sure all those guys are there before you get down. But that's why, I talk about it a lot. The volume approach allows for the wins and the losses on injury, on craziness to kind of all just noise out at the end, and I can focus in on the 60% of games in the middle chunk that I actually, have a fighting chance in either direction on.
Let's keep it rolling here, Justin. A couple more games to get to.
Yeah.
Over to the back to the SEC, I should say. Vanderbilt at number 6, Florida. And looking at the point spread here on the open, Florida minus 12.5, juiced in their direction. Total of 155.5. Gators coming off of a blowout loss over the weekend to Kentucky. We touched on that one on Friday's episode to beat the closing number. And Vanderbilt has been up and down here in league play. They had a couple big back-to-back wins over Tennessee and Kentucky, for that matter. And sandwiched in between them, blowout loss at Alabama, 30-point loss at Oklahoma to Porter Moser's Sooners. And Oklahoma, by the way, in SEC play, talk about three-point variance, shooting 40% from three and allowing a 29.7% clip. But I digress here, Justin. What say you in Gainesville?
Give me the road dog. Give me the double-digit points. Give me the 13.5, which is where I took it already. And I think this is a really nice spot. I thought I was hopefully going to get 14.5, but I was even late to that, playing in Monday afternoon. Look, Florida is a very good team. There's no doubt about it. We do have them ranked as a top 5 offense, but their defense has been largely overperforming. And in conference play as well. They're expected to be allowing 56% shooting at the rim so far this season. They are in conference play alone, and they are allowing 35% of shots at the rim. So an extra 5% from what's actually happening on 35%. You can start to understand these little points add up. Opponents are shooting just 29% against them in SEC play from 3, and they allow a lot of shots from 3. 43% of shots against them are from deep, and again, that 29% probably just not going to maintain. Likely a estimation of their defense based on that, and that's how it works. That's how the efficiency models work. That's how Ken Palm works. That's how Haslametrics works. How Bart Torvik works. How Evmia works, and it's okay, right? I mean, that's how basketball works. So that's the way the efficiencies should also work. But what we're trying to get at is predicting the future, not telling you what has already happened, right? That's the very big difference. And that's what the pitfalls can be when you try to predict based on what's already happened. You want to predict on, the way the game was played, because sometimes the results don't line up with the process. And it's actually a lot of the time. It's probably 30 to 40% of the times. So it's college basketball. I mean, watch the game for 2 years. You'll agree with me. But Vandy, the defense, honestly, has looked great. I think their defense is primed to improve, and they come at a discount here, expected to have opponents shooting much worse against them, seeing a 41% clip of long-range threes go down against the Commodores. So, yeah, again, great play. Very, very rare for me to have such strong feelings on an SEC line. This is usually such a strong, conference with such liquidity on these bets that it gets figured out, and I do think this one will get figured out. I do not expect 13, 14 to last a long time. 13.5 I think is already gone. I don't even know if you can. It might probably be 12.5 tomorrow morning.
It is gone, yeah.
Right. So 14.5. 14 is the Ken Palm number. I would 12.5 fine. I think this is a single digit game. So I wouldn't really go anywhere beneath 12.5. But there's reason to think that Vanderbilt continues to do what they've done. A couple 1-point losses that shot quality expected to be wins. They aren't exactly a talent oasis. I don't even know how you complete that analogy, but they aren't compared to the rest of the SEC. So maybe that happens a little bit. They kind of get in a little bit of trouble with some of that disparity and shot quality. Maybe stumbles a little bit and gives them a little too much credit. But 13.5, 12.5 feel great. I like that play a lot. I don't know if it would be a full unit, but it's definitely on my card.
So, devil's advocate here, because I'm not going to have a bet on this one.
Yeah.
I'm just a little concerned with, can Vandy, because in a high variance game, despite the fact that it's a double-digit point spread, you're going to need to attack the rim well. You're going to need a pretty stout 3-point clip to cover this number, for me at least, if you're Vanderbilt on the road. Vanderbilt doesn't really have the size to combat Florida's length, especially with Florida coming off that just disastrous loss in Knoxville at Tennessee over the weekend. You know they're going to be laser focused to win this game. Also, just thinking about the market perception, if we go back to a line that you hit on, you literally cashed with Mizzou and Florida going back to a few weeks ago. Mizzou was a 10.5-point dog, I want to say, at Florida. Yep. They got a lot of shot variance in that game. Now we're talking about a 2-point differential on the point spread against a worse Vanderbilt team. I don't see a ton of value there for me.
I understand. I do. I think that's fair. And again, the Missouri game, I was actually expected to be a loss from shot quality at home, which is pretty impressive. And again, that's kind of the game that they're going to have to play, right? Florida played a game where I think you'd maybe be surprised at how many threes they hit and still didn't win. I mean, they took, 54 shots in total, which is low. That's what it's going to have to be. And they got beat in that sense. Missouri won the possession battle. And I don't know if necessarily that's how it's going to go in this one, but that is kind of where at some level for Vandy, they're going to need to attack. And they definitely can struggle a little bit in forcing those turnovers. And maybe Walter Clayton just tears them up. But again, their defense is supposed to be so much better. What shot quality is seen out of the defense is that they are the best in the SEC. I mean, they rank third in shot quality defense in the nation. Crazy. It's a crazy thing to say. And it really all comes from the half-court defense, and they don't really see a lot of transition. They do a lot of good work in keeping you off balance, off the dribble. So, I think this is a good spot. It's a tough sell. I understand that, but sometimes the best bets are the toughest sells. The turnover forced rates are great, and it's not like they aren't seeing good competition. They don't allow opponents to get good spacing. I think sometimes it can be a little bit of like a surprise for opponents. And so maybe in that sense, you go first half and you take some points first half, and maybe Florida figures it out in the second half there, especially on the road. So maybe that's the angle to look at, but I definitely do think the value side is Vandy.
No, and it's fair points all around. And this is why I think this podcast is great for the listener and the viewer, whether you're catching this on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, wherever you find a favorite podcast. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. If you want to spread the word, we appreciate that as well. You look at Florida coming off of a blowout loss at Tennessee. Vanderbilt, same thing at Oklahoma. To me, that's not a game I want to get involved in just because situationally there's no edge. For you, you see the edge. So that's why I think it gives the viewer, listener, different perspectives on a single game and a handicap that can go a bunch of different ways.
I just got a text saying, quote, "No way Purdue opening 7.5. KP has -7 and Owen Freeman's certainly worth more than half a point." So I love my text messages on a Monday afternoon, Eli. I agree, and I agree with you too about the points here. It's a good combination because we don't really think the same way. We don't approach things the same way. I'm so heavily steeped in expected data that it's essentially like having the presence of the algorithm here with you, and you approach things a lot more like holistically and use a lot of like the basketball that you see and a lot of how is this X's and O's matchup going to impose its will or get will imposed on. And I'm sort of here like, well, they develop good shots. And look, both have their merits. Both have their merits, and I do think it's an interesting game because at the end of the day, and I think anyone who really sits here and who's been listening with us the whole season and who's hanging out with us here in minute 40 of the podcast today, it's a game of can you beat KenPom, and I think. For me personally, I found the expected data gives you a really good leg up. I do think, like at the end of the day, I love the way that you approach it, Eli. But I think a lot of the time you're not seeing what other people aren't as much. Like you might get there and you might have the right idea, but like the margin that SQ I feel like it's given me, and so reliably and with so little effort. Like I swear I do so much less work than I've ever done before, just trusting the data. So it's great. It's
I
great,
will say,
you know? Yeah, please,
I will say,
yeah,
yes, there's always a response there.
of course. Let's make the podcast great.
Right. When it comes to understanding the market, because situationally that's where it comes into play. Like Florida, this is where I'll give you credit here. Over the weekend, and a perfect example of this is Oregon coming off of a loss, blowout loss at UCLA. Market dents that one. Didn't open that far off of 7, but closes 7. And you could argue the line was inflated. Hindsight would agree with you because Nebraska wins the game outright. I bet the game live, lost it, whatever. In this situation, you're looking at Florida, the home tax being inflated, even though you're coming off of a loss situationally. So I'm generally in agreement with the market. My numbers, my rationale, my intuition is going to be generally in line with the market. You're going to be looking to combat that. Looking to say, well, this line is inflated. So I that's where I don't think it's either of us missing something per se. I think it's truly looking at it from two different angles. And you saying this is too high, me saying either it's not high enough or it is right where it should be and I'm not touching it. I bet it on open.
Yep.
Fair?
I think you nailed it. It's how it works. It's about sort of these overestimations to trying to essentially, and like we talked about it on like the past episode, I feel the spot tax in the way when I look at lines, and it's a different type of bobbing and weaving with it. So no, it'll be interesting to see. I think it makes for a fun dichotomy and we have a good time with it. Minute 45. We got a couple more though, right? Or one more?
Yeah, let's get to one more here. I know you have a play on it. Big one for BYU and Arizona for that matter. Arizona has Texas Tech, a rematch with the Red Raiders coming up on deck. So potential look-ahead spot for Arizona on the road at BYU. Slightly bigger favorite. I have a slight edge to BYU per my numbers. I don't know if I'll play it just yet. I kind of want to see how the market fluctuates for this game. But Arizona, probably not a team that's going to take advantage of BYU's turnover issues. BYU, probably a perfect instance of the situation we just talked about. Home tax, UCF getting bet up over the weekend. BYU defies that, wins the game outright with, I think, UCF closing as a 2.5, 3-point home dog. Can Arizona guard a very intangibly sound BYU motion offense when Yegor Demon isn't turning the ball over? He is one of the hardest guards in college basketball, the freshman, because he's a point forward, 6'9", and has excellent vision. So couple that with altitude, I would probably have an edge to BYU, but where are you looking for this game, Justin?
BYU. We love BYU, and we're a little low on Arizona. Ken Pom ranks these teams 15 and 30 or so. We also rank them 15 and 30 or so, but a little flippy-floppy. We have BYU as the top 15 team, Arizona as the top 30 team, and again, that's a pretty decent switch. You're talking about, a good 2 points per 100 possession from either team. So you'll get right around what I would need for a game, which is about a 3-point edge from that, right? Because you don't get 100 possessions, you get about 70, 75. So you're going to get about that 3-point edge. So I will be on BYU. I played, I believe, at -1. -115 was the price I got down at FanDuel on the open. And again, I just think right now, especially in conference play, they are, they're shooting well from deep. They're getting good looks at the rim. And it's essentially just not going as well as you would expect. The loss to Utah expected to be a massive win. So maybe that was just a little bit of the local rivalry not going great. They were 0 of 8 on mid-range jumpers. So assuming that those were those last-ditch shots, at least like probably 2/3 of them were like looks at the end of the clock where they needed the big bucket to stay in the game. They didn't. It gets a little out of hand. It looks kind of bad that they had that string. That was kind of finishing that string there at the beginning of January where they looked pretty weak. They lost to Houston, which is understandable on the road. They lost to Texas Tech at home. Expected to be a shot quality win. They lost by 5. That one was, I think, fueled a little bit by some tough shooting on threes as well, and they take a lot of them. So you're going to live and die with that variance, right? And then TCU beats them. 4-point game on the road. Again, I'm not really too upset about that. Big 12, a gauntlet of a few days. That was 4 days after the Texas Tech game. And then they were flying back home for an Oklahoma State game that they did win. And then finally Utah, but now they've rattled off 4 wins. Colorado, Cincinnati, Baylor, UCF. The last 2 looking much bigger. I do think this is a spot where you get in on them with the Arizona game. They probably get in on them one more time with the Cincinnati game on the road. I'm so anti-Cincinnati. And then you fade them, West Virginia and Kansas State. I think they will likely lose both those 2. So 3 more wins coming up for BYU. 2 more wins for BYU here, Arizona, Cincinnati. And then back-to-back losses, West Virginia, Kansas State. Or at least not going to cover Kansas State. They'll probably beat Kansas State. But they might not. They probably won't cover. So that's my prediction. They might lose outright, actually. Jerome Tang went into the trap, took over the trap. With Iowa State. So, look, Big 12 is a gauntlet. You never know what's going to happen, and I do think BYU is a team to buy. They're essentially Alabama light in the mountains that no one's talking about.
Yeah. No, and they've transformed from last year. Obviously, Mark Pope no longer there going to Kentucky, yet they're still a tournament team to this point.
A lot of shooting and getting those rebounds, efficient in transition, don't really allow you to get to the rim. And that's what you want. It's a good defense. And a good offense. So I think a good time to continue to invest. They're showing you why you should have been betting on them through the hard streak. And I think the line's probably off. So good luck. I'll be on them.
One last thing for me to throw into this handicap for the game, and I'm trying to see because I don't think you mentioned it. I also don't think FanDuel has a line for this game yet. Yeah, still nothing for. Oh, they do. BYU. -1.5, -122 on the money line, so small favorite. I make them around -2.5, so I'm with you. One last thing that I think shot quality needs to start baking in is Caleb Love variance. we need a CLV.
I can tell you his. Yeah, Caleb.
You like that? You like that?
A
little
CLV?
CLV?
A little CLV.
Not closing live value. Over his last 2 games, Caleb Love is shooting 40% from 3. That's not going to last, especially on the road in altitude, right?
I doubt it. He's probably one of the most fickle players there is. We are not the biggest fans over here at Shot Quality. He's hot, so expected to have 21 points at ASU, had 27. Expected to have 20 points against OSU, had 27. And then he's a little bit more pedestrian against what I would call good teams, right? So in the last 10 games, here's his hot games: TCU, UCF, OSU, ASU. Arguably the 4 of the weakest teams in the conference. Cold games: Cincinnati. So okay, maybe that's another weak team, but Baylor and Texas Tech. He just doesn't look good. A middle of the road game against West Virginia. I'm not really sold. I think, expected to see like 5-10% less in terms of how well he was shooting in some of these recent games. I think you want to go against him. He's been hot. Doesn't usually last for him. Like it's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his last 8 games have been distinctly hot. So I think it's probably a good time to sell on him. He started the year cold. This is going to be a tough test. He's the type of player who I think, in terms of what he can do, the steals are great. He has the shooting prowess. Like, you can tell a lot from a player by how well they shoot free throws. Like, he should be a good shooter, but the rim efficiency isn't there.
The shot selection at times.
Right, it's the shot selection. So essentially, he just takes stupid threes a lot, and he's really inefficient off ball. So, he needs to just sort of figure that out and really just, I think, wisen up, because he has the shooting talent, but the shot making, you can't even see through it because of the way he takes the shots. So it's there, but, barely. He's got to really figure it out. I don't think there's that much of, a future. He looks like an overseas baller. He's not NBA ready.
Wow. Already quoting his long-term prospects here. I love it. I'm with you, though. I'm with you. I have no reason.
Shot making rate is 16th percentile. Like,
Yeah, no, it's bad.
I understand Pac-12 Player of the Year in his first season. I know, but like, there's always been a little bit of this type of concern where
A
it's
lot
just,
of this.
yeah, and the inefficiency attacking the rim too. He's not like taking smart drives. It's just like, and that could all be corrected. And maybe he proves me wrong. Maybe he hangs up on his bulletin board. Please, man. I hope that someone uses my take to make themselves a better basketball player. That would be the biggest crowning achievement of my life. But yeah, no, please. I think I'm just calling it how I see it. The shot making rank is bad. The shot selection rank is 25th percentile. The shot making rank is 18th percentile. And that's 324 possessions this year. I mean, sure, you go back and you look at last year, it's a little bit different and I think, maybe you expect him to get back to that. He was at 80th percentile shot making last year, 61st percentile SQPPP. So I don't really know what changed. I think it's a lot more to do with just like I think the shots he's taking from three. So I don't know, but draft stock doesn't look nearly as good as it did last time around.
Yeah, I mean, even as of 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when UNC made it to the Final Four and made it to the national championship, with him being a big part of it. I mean, not to continue this conversation for that much longer, but
sure.
You go back to last year, they had Boswell, who's not an electric scorer, but they had Larson, so less was on his shoulders last year. Maybe that has something to do with it. Either way,
you have the ball in your hands as the clock winds down. It totally changes the way that your shots look. I understand that, and that is probably essentially what happens. And you see it with like guys like I hate to make an NBA reference on this show, but like a R.J. Barrett going to Toronto or being in New York, and this guy looked like he was supposed to be all that in a bag of chips, but now all of a sudden his SQ doesn't look good. It's because he has the ball in his hand in the last second. He's chucking up mid-range shots, and that's what happens to Caleb Love. So, yeah, he's definitely a little bit of a victim of circumstance, but guess what? The players that go on to do incredible things still make something of that. You get your Jalen Brunsons of the pack. You get your Ja Morants of the pack that can not only perform in the mid-range, but also dish it out and shoot. So we'll see. I mean, there's plenty of time for him to prove us all wrong. I don't think they're necessarily out of contention right now. But, yeah. It's going to be an interesting end to the season here. This is a big game. You want to shut me up? A big game.
No, it's a huge game. I actually wanted to pull this up just to see before we wrap it, and we have gone a long time here on Caleb Love before we wrap up the show.
Yeah.
But on a points purpose, this is wild. Okay, this is wild. Arizona would not be where it is without Caleb Love. I think that goes without saying, just because they need some semblance of a guy who can create his own shot, right? I think we could both agree on that point. But Arizona is averaging 122.8 points per 100 possessions with Caleb Love on the floor. Without him, 125.1. Kind of says it all, right?
Again, yeah, that's what's happening this year. Good. Look, I'm glad it lines up with what the shot quality is seeing, because it just, again, maybe he's just not having a good year. Maybe he flips it around. He's shown he can be that guy who can hit the shots that only 20 out of every 100 players walking around in Division I basketball can hit on average. That he does have an extra standard deviation gear that he can shift into, but it's just not here right now. And again, Arizona's going dancing. They're going to be there.
That was my point too.
Right, they're going to be. So maybe he just needs to lock in come March. Maybe he's a big game guy. I mean, we've seen some of the crazy shots. We know he has the talent. Look, it's going to be fun. So,
if you take anything away from this podcast, CLV, not closing line value, is a very real thing. It is. What's the Anchorman line? It's something and it's real. Or what movie? You know what I'm talking about? Oh boy, that's a rough end to the show on my.
It is a rough end to the show, Eli. You hit me put me on the spotlight for.
I'll take it out.
It's all right.
Caleb Love and I will both take L's here at the end of Beat the Closing Number. Justin, anything to wrap here before we get out of here?
I mean, yeah, we got a big week brewing over at Shot Quality. Make sure you check out the social feeds Tuesday morning. Probably a pretty big announcement. I can't reveal too much more, but yeah, check it out. Should be a fun little blip on the radar. And then, of course, all week, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, check out Live Betcast and Live Bet with me for 45 minutes of craziness that I end up taking a nap after because it's so intense. So, yeah, no, but it's one of a kind, and 12, 15 bets in 45 minutes of action. Powered by Shot Quality, so.
Is the announcement that Caleb Love is going to be sponsored by Shot Quality?
Oh, I don't think that's happening anytime soon if anyone tags him in this podcast. So no, but I mean, again, I'm a big fan. I'm just saying what the data says. Hope he figures it out. I would love to see Arizona get the win. Again, betting and fandom very separate for me. So I'll be betting BYU, and I'll be enjoying the basketball game either way, just as I enjoy spending my time here with you, Eli. Thank you, as always, for allowing me and SQ to come up here and talk our talk and give a little insight into what this data can do.
Absolutely. He is Justin Perri at Justin Perri 8 on X. I'm Eli Hershkovich. Follow me there on X. You could also check out my betting previews over at thelines.com. I'll have one up on Tuesday morning for Ole Miss and Kentucky, and you could also find my best bets in our Discord channel. Link is over at thelines.com. In the top right-hand corner, it is free, so be sure to check that out. Thanks for watching and listening to our college basketball picks here on Beat the Closing Number. So long, everybody, and good luck with your Tuesday bets.